Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Now, just a second here. Really? Where's your notepad? Do I have to remind you each and every time? Goodness gracious. Come on, pause the video right now and grab a notepad so that you can make a commitment to yourself that you will jot down a note, some kind of action item that you will implement in your business today. That's what this is all about. And today is really important. I want you to take a note about this. Stop copying me. Please don't copy me. The tyranny of the urgent and the inbox as its prime culprit. Your inbox is probably, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a manager, loaded with stuff that is detracting you from doing what you need to do most importantly. And we need to deal with that. And that's what today is all about. We need to deal with that. I have made an observation over my career, and I've recently made this in our organization and in one of my clients' organizations, that leaders are being carbon copied on unnecessary communications within the organization. And you need to take proactive steps to make sure this doesn't happen to you. Do you have people in your organization who carbon copy you on things that really you don't need to see? And what are you doing about that? I noticed this over my career, that I was getting more and more email, and often what was happening was I was simply, because of the efficiency of that communication, and we have a video that talks about the inverse relationship between effective communication and efficient communication. But because of the efficiency of email, it's so easy to communicate to multiple people at one time. And so because of this, people tend to do that. They just haphazardly add more and more, indiscriminately add more and more people to the carbon copy field. And sometimes even the blind carbon copy field. And that's a different issue we can talk about. And sometimes there's good reason for this, but often it's a matter of, well, maybe this person should know about this as well. And they add you to their carbon copy. Now, as a leader who's trying to be as effective as possible, you can't allow this to continue. Today's homework, I want you to look at your inbox. Well, let's look at what has made it into your inbox over the past, say, week or so. And depending on how much email you get, some of you only need to look at yesterday, and that'll be a large enough sample to give you an idea that where the problems lay. And some of you may get less email and you have to look at a larger sample, but we've got to deal with this. The key is action here. Do you have someone in your organization or multiple people in your organization? Worse yet, do you have a culture in your organization of carbon copying all the time in email? You need to put a stop to it. So I'm going to ask you to forward this video to people on your team so that they can understand the new culture as it relates to email and the rules that you have. So here are the rules. Send the email to the person who really needs it, the person that it's important. And if it's not important, then maybe you want to encourage your people not to send an email. And in all seriousness, there are different ways to communicate. Just because the email is efficient, sometimes what should happen instead is that a note should be made. Maybe something should be added to an agenda for a recurring meeting that occurs between meeting department heads and other stakeholders in the business, whatever it may be. And maybe it's one-on-one meetings between two key people that need to communicate, a supervisor and the employee, something like that. Maybe HR's meeting with somebody, and those things can be added to an agenda, and they don't have to necessarily be emailed at this moment. The problem with email is it shows up, it gives you a notification, and people get trained and they become habituated to or conditioned to constantly be checking their inbox, and there is the tyranny of the urgent. And again, you become less effective. So the rule, once again, is only email stuff that is maybe important and urgent. And then I understand we're not going to cover in great detail the various ways that people need to evaluate that, but you as the boss want to make sure that you have a clean inbox. And that starts not by being so diligent at replying to email. What you should be focusing on instead is eliminating email that comes in, unnecessary, unimportant email. And certainly urgent email that's not important, that's terrible. And I understand that leaders sometimes trick themselves into believing that they're being productive because they're active. They confuse activity with productivity, and you sort of take pride in the fact you don't understand how much email I get in a day. I'm very, very busy. It's not about being busy, it's about being effective. It's about driving meaningful change, innovation, and value in your business. That's what we discuss. That's what we're here to do. And the reason for today's video is because I've observed this in my organization and others, and I think this is one of those things that people just don't reflect on. It's like, why do I allow this to occur? And it's really sort of insidious and pervasive. It just creeps its way in. Before you know it, you've got a really big problem. And I think that is the main reason that people allow this to occur, is that maybe when you're new to a position, you're new in business, you're new to a leadership position or management, and you don't want to offend anybody, and you sort of aren't exactly sure what the parameters of good leadership should be. And one of the things you think is, well, I need to be in the loop, I need to be a good communicator, and my people need to have access to me. And that's all true, but to be effective, you need to manage that really well. You need to organize that and define those things. So the first thing you're going to tell your team again is, do not send me email unless it's important. And do not carbon copy me on email that's important for someone else to receive unless it's imperative that I know about it as well. And even if it is imperative that I know about it, only copy me if it's imperative that I have that information at that moment. Since we have these recurring meetings that we set up, and you should have some other mechanism through which you can communicate with your people very effectively, you can then say to them, instead, if there's something that you feel compelled to keep me in the loop about, then maybe put that aside on an agenda, and then we can, and you should have some maybe some sort of cloud document, some sort of meeting tracker, agenda, parking lot, some sort of tool. It could be a spreadsheet or a database in which people can add things so that they don't forget. And I think that's another reason for this, is that people, they are like, right now, this is top of mind, and so I'm going to send this email out to the boss, or I'm going to send it out to department head A or team member B, and I'm going to carbon copy the boss because I want to make sure he's aware. And that's where this all gets started. And before you know it, everybody's doing it in the organization, and you as the leader have way too much email. And what also happens is you start to get this desensitization to email. Because you get so much, the carbon copying, the copying of the email to the boss, well, I gotta keep him in the loop, I gotta keep him in the loop. That's not true. You wanna make sure your people understand, I can be kept in the loop through other mechanisms, but what ends up happening here is you become desensitized. You get so much email that maybe something's coming from payroll or from HR, and you're like, oh, they copy me on everything, so you don't read it entirely. Maybe you don't read it at all. Maybe you just browse the snippet or the subject line, and you make a determination whether or not that really requires your attention. And I mean, in one sense, that's kind of good that you're doing that, but you can end up missing critical information this way. Therefore, instead of doing it that way, you should define for your team what they should and should not send you, and err on the side of being conservative, that they should not send you things. So I'm communicating to my team, I'm going to say on a regular basis, which is really a symptom that I haven't got the culture quite instilled with everybody that I want. Please stop copying me on everything. Please do not carbon copy me on anything unless it requires my direct attention, because I need to spend my time and direct my attention on those things that are most important for the organization. And I tell my people, and you need me to do that. And if you carbon copy me on other things, I understand that you want to be respectful of me and keep me in the loop, but there are other ways to do that. Another thing that happens is that at the beginning of a thread, at the beginning of a communication, maybe it was important that you were involved. They actually had something, the person who sent out the email had a reason for carbon copying you, and you needed to be notified of this information. And even a response may have been not expected, but anticipated. But then what happens is that people reply to all, reply to all, reply to all. So that's the other thing you want to do in terms of a rule to your people, is say, stop hitting reply to all. This is another reason that inboxes are filled with information that specific people don't need, and the specific person who does need it may overlook it because it's not always obvious, because there's this whole packed inbox thing and everybody's being carbon copied. The other thing with reply to all is that sometimes, you know, again, it starts off the initial thread where, yeah, there were 2 or 3, or rather 3 or 4, or maybe even 5 people that needed to be involved. But then that was because you might be asking, does anyone know what happened to this piece of equipment, or when we're going to get this order in, or something like that, and you're asking multiple people. That's fine. That's a good use of the technology. And then what happens is someone hits reply to all with the answer that may stimulate more of the conversation. But now it's really between 2 people. Now the person who's in the know and the original person could be communicating just with one another, and the other people who are maybe not involved with that order, or aren't responsible with that equipment, or whatever it is, don't have the intelligence of the intel in the organization to contribute to the conversation, or shouldn't be. It's not important for them to be. They're not left out anymore because everybody keeps hitting reply to all. And you know this occurs in the organization. You've seen this, where it's like, really? Do I have to see all of this? Social media is very much like this, where you're part of a group, and every time anyone in the group communicates about anything, everyone in the group is notified, and the notifications just condition you and take you away from what you need to focus on. They're a distraction. That's why you want to stop this. Now, if you're going to tolerate this with other people in your organization, that's fine. Frankly, I'm okay if my people decide that they want to be carbon copied on everything that their people, like my managers, if they want someone else on their team to make sure they carbon copy them to keep them in the loop, I'm okay with that, but I'm telling them right now, along with you, that that is ineffective. But each of us has to make a decision on how to best manage our organization. And I would say the closer you get to the front lines, the less that the person has leadership or management responsibility, then the effectiveness component that we're discussing here, I'm going to let go of that a little bit and let people manage how they want to, let them manage their day the way they want to. But I want to communicate with everyone in the organization and convince them this is not effective use of your time, and there's a lot of disadvantages to allowing this to occur. But I'm going to insist on it for those top leaders in the organization, those people that you need to be the most effective. You know, even as I say that out loud, I'm really wavering on that, because you want your whole organization to be as effective as possible. I'm just, I guess, acknowledging, I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth here, is that I'm acknowledging that it's more critical, the closer you get to the top of an organization, the more critical leader that you have, that person be exercising these habits that we're talking about and be very effective. And then you get this trickle down effect, and that's where the culture spreads, where through example you teach people, don't copy me on everything. I'm trying to be effective. I'm trying to focus my time on what's most important. Anyway, getting back to that notion of reply to all, that's the second one. You tell people, don't copy me if it's not imperative that I'm on there. And then once you realize I'm no longer part of the conversation, I'm no longer an imperative part of the conversation, the email thread, take me off, and do not, as a habit, use reply to all in our organization. That's the message you want to send to your people. And as I mentioned, you're going to explain to them that's because you need me, the business needs me focused as effectively as possible on those things which are most important. And anything that is a distraction to me, anything that requires my time and puts demands on me is a divided focus. Those are things that are going to detract from my ultimate effectiveness and my ability to carry out those most important things. So that's the first thing. And once, because remember, people act in their own self-interest, and they are they need to be told what's in it for them. And besides just the boss saying, hey, here's the rules, and that's where you start, you also want to convince them as to why. And you want to tell them that you're trying to be more effective, and the more stable organization that you can help create, that's good for everybody, as long as you align the objectives of all your stakeholders in your organization. The other thing you have to do to address this is you have to think, why are people doing this? And it could be just bad habit. It could be, like I said, well, it starts off where they have good rationale for including you, and then over time it's just, you know, they never thought to take you off of the email when it's no longer a relevant conversation to you. It could be that, but there's other things. I noticed that insecurity is one of them. People who may want a pat on the back, they're doing something good for the organization, so they want to make sure the boss is aware. And so the boss gets copied on everything that anyone does as a subtle means of saying, hey boss, look over here, look what I'm doing. And it's like, that is not an effective use of your time, but it is probably symptomatic that you are maybe not doing what you need to do in terms of celebrating success, taking defined moments to go out of your way to pat people on the back and recognize them for their achievements. And so what you have to do for all of this stuff is you have to find a different way to give people what they need. If people have a real need to copy you on an email, then of course you're going to allow them to do it. But when you start to explore those and you ask people, why did you copy me on this? Then you will start to think, oh, I guess we don't have as another mechanism through which you feel that you can communicate to me. We don't have an agenda that you can add agenda items to, and we don't have a regularly scheduled meeting that you meet with me, or this particular group over here needs to meet more often. These types of things will start to surface, and then you can address those individually and make sure that it's not all about email. If you are suffering from too much email, you've got to make a stand. You've got to take action today on it. So think about what is the reasons, and ask people, what are the reasons? Insecurity, getting recognition. Maybe people are not sure that you trust them well enough, so they want, and it may not be like an honesty type trust, but trusting their competence, and so they're sort of looking for reassurance from you that yes, you're doing the right thing. Or sometimes they are trying to alert you to something subtly because they are not happy with someone else in the organization, so they're in effect complaining to somebody or raising a beef with someone, and they're letting the boss know so that the boss can maybe come in and deal with it. Well, that's not the best way to handle that either, and that probably is a symptom that you don't have another mechanism. So you're gonna have to get to the bottom of this. It all starts by setting the ground rules with people and teaching them the culture you're trying to get to, which is, we don't want tyranny of the urgent. We don't want inboxes loaded up every day. We don't want to have unnecessary communications between us, but we do want important and necessary communications. So let's set up alternative ways to make sure that we're doing that much more effective ways. And you've got to communicate with your people. You know, you've got to get to the bottom of this. So this is sort of an example of an important type of item that you might do, but you're not doing because you're checking your inbox constantly, you're checking your email, so you're not taking the time to go and sit with your people and say, stop copying me, stop carbon copying me, stop replying to all, and let's, as an organization, get more effective. That's where your time needs to be spent, setting up meetings like that everybody comes away from them with a new game plan, and you're a little bit more effective. Of course, all of this only makes sense if you agree with what I'm saying here, which is it is a bad idea for you to have people copy you on everything. Some managers, some leaders, business owners are micromanagers. They want to have their fingers in every little thing in the business. That's a bad idea. And you can watch our video on micromanagement and convince yourself that it's maybe not the best thing to do. It's okay for you to get into the details of things, but I need to convince you here and now, so that you'll make these changes, that having your team carbon copy you on everything will distract you, will make you less effective, and it will also desensitize you. It's like the boy who cried wolf, the old fable, you know, is every time you get that email, and some of them are not very important, not very important, not very important, and then you get something really important and it gets mixed in with everything. The wolf really does come into the village. The boy cries wolf. Nobody pays attention because we're getting notified of wolf constantly. And so make sure that you, push back. If you don't agree with me on this, then we need to discuss that in greater detail, because if you really want to become more effective, you're gonna have to embrace this and ask your organization to stop copying you on everything and make sure that you take control of your inbox. Earlier I mentioned blind carbon copy, and I think there is some email etiquette, and you want to be careful using blind carbon copy. And what I did with my management team is I said, if it's something that you're just keeping me in the loop and you really feel strongly that you should copy me on this email, then blind carbon copy me. Then I will look up and I will see that I'm blind carbon copied, and I will know you're just following my instructions, which is you don't expect a reply and you don't even expect me to be involved. You're just keeping me in the loop. But use that sparingly, people. I tell my organization, don't blind carbon copy me on, I'm not saying never, but use that sparingly. But at least I will know by looking up into the blind carbon copy that that is what you're doing. You're merely keeping me in the loop, and I can appreciate that, and then I can then I don't have to get involved. And I've got that whole video, be careful what you say, boss, because my nature, and maybe yours, is that when a problem presents itself, you feel the need to get involved, and you don't want to have that disadvantage in your organization as well, where they carbon copy you, or even blind carbon copy you, or whatever, in some way, reply to all, you are informed of it, and you feel the need as the boss to help everybody sort through this problem. But that's what you've hired them to do. These other stakeholders need to do that. That's how they're going to grow and develop, and you need to focus your attention elsewhere. One other tip I want to give you, that as you sort of communicate to your team the ground rules for email, is that a best practice, and I would insist on it, is address the email to the person to whom you're expecting the main recipient, or whoever is intended to be the recipient of the information. So if you're carbon copying people, even because it is an effective way to communicate to other people who should be left in the loop or kept in the loop at that point, make sure that if there is somebody specific that you're trying to address, that you put that up front. And maybe it starts off where, no, I'm addressing a group, but then it becomes where there's an individual, then put the name in there. So you may have said, hey gang, just want to know the following, blah, 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 blah. Then somebody replies, they give you that information, and now you stop replying to all and you address that person. Okay, thank you, Joe, I appreciate you getting back to me on that, da 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 da. But even more important to do that when you continue to reply to all. So if there is a situation where you're keeping more people, it is a group conversation, and for whatever reason, the group wants to all be involved, and you have determined that it's imperative to keep everybody in the loop, make sure you address a specific individual. Watch our video on the 3 monks. Have you heard the one about the 3 monks? Watch that. It's really, I'm not going to get into it now, but it will convince you, oh, okay, the 3 monks, that's why I need to do this. Address to the people specifically. And there's that thing that I mentioned earlier as well, when you hit reply to all, and sometimes what'll happen is the people who were originally carbon copied on the email, they're also carbon copied on the reply to all, and the person who originally sent the email is in the main recipient field. And I did this just the other day. And what you are sometimes doing is you are determining, no, I actually want to address somebody else who's in this conversation, and I still want to, maybe you do or maybe you don't, want to address the person who originated the thread, but now I'm addressing somebody who was originally carbon copied. That's another area where you need to address the person. So maybe Frank sent out the original email and he carbon copied Joe and Mary. And then you hit reply, but you want to address Mary, but what's going to happen, you hit reply to all rather, you want to address Mary, it's going to send it back to Frank and carbon copy Joe and Mary, and without putting Mary in the subject line, then, you know, it could be Frank who thinks you're addressing him. And Mary's like, well, that's actually my responsibility or whatever. So the best practice that I want you to do in that case is to type Mary at the beginning so that Mary knows she's the primary person that you are interjecting or communicating with at that point, but you've decided that you don't want to exclude any of the others. The other thing you should do is drag Mary up. Most of the best email clients will allow you to drag and drop from the primary recipient field to the carbon copy field, and you can drag your contacts back and forth. But however you do it, maybe you have to retype the recipients, make sure that the primary recipient, in my example, Mary, is now in the main field, and in your carbon copy field, you put Frank and Joe. That is the best practice. Guys, this is not, I don't want to understate the importance of this. This all comes back to you being effective, and people are so ineffective because we get tied down, we get buried in email. You've got to look at the little things. You got to stop. You got to spend an hour or two. Your homework today might be to spend 20 minutes. Start asking yourself, how is it that I get so many email? And you can start to eliminate some of that stuff. The last point I want to make is on automation. We're experts of automation at BMI, and we're happy to help you, and we can set up all sorts of automations. One of the things that people love in automation are push notifications and alerts. So the system is in fact emailing you. It's not another person, it's your system, it's your database emailing you and bringing something to your attention. When you're setting this up, be careful. At the beginning, you might anticipate in a process, you're having us or someone designs your workflow process, a blueprint, and then you're like, oh yeah, and if this happens, so that automation works with if-then statements. If this occurs, then the following should happen. So you're anticipating, you go, yeah, if that happens, have it send me an email. And we can set that up, and in these systems you can set it up that multiple people get email, and the same thing occurs, is everybody goes, yeah, send me a copy on that, alert me when that happens as well. And that's okay maybe when a process is new, but you have to evaluate this. When you're looking at your inbox, ask yourself, how many of these automatic push notifications am I getting, and are they necessary for me to get? Then go back to whoever's organizing this and administering this for you and say, you know what? I thought I wanted to know, but now what I'd like you to do is enhance the automation. Only let me know, only alert me if the first person, as an escalation, if the first person doesn't reply or if a particular condition doesn't exist. I can't get too much into automation right now. Just the people who know how it works know what I'm talking about. And if you don't know how it works and you want us to do this for you, we can do it. Just be careful with push notifications and alerts that come into your inbox. Make sure they are relevant. Don't do it to yourself. Don't ask your automation expert to set up something to notify you of every little thing that occurs in your organization, every little glitch that happens. There are other people that should be looking after some of this stuff. And then maybe only on an escalation. It's like, well, if the problem persists and the boss has to get involved, then you get a notification, not on the very first one. There's another thing I've noticed is that if you, as the leader, as the top dog in your organization, maybe you are the super admin and you're subscribing to certain software, and the providers of that software need to notify you for updates, or they have newsletters, or other relevant information, like there's going to be an outage for maintenance or whatever. Maybe there's something that's not working in your system and they're trying to notify, and their automated notifications go to the super admin, and maybe you don't have control over that, and so you're getting that. Take a look at these things. And are you getting information that there's somebody else in your organization who you would prefer to get, and the organization who sends it out doesn't give you the option to change that in the settings or whatever? Well, then you can use things like filters and forwarding. And that's another great way to control the tyranny of the urgent that the inbox represents, is use the power of your email client and those tools such as folders and filters and forwarding and these kinds of things, so that the right person gets the information. That's what we're talking about here. And by the way, if you have a terrible email client, reach out to us, we'll set you up. We've got the best one, and it's not the one that starts with the G. We've got one with very powerful tools that we can set you up on, and everything I'm talking about, all these notifications and automations and forwarding, all this stuff we can do for you. We can help you set all of that kind of stuff up. But my real point was, you are probably getting things in your inbox that, you know, is being sent to you automatically. And it might be email campaigns, you can unsubscribe to certain things, but I really think there is a lot of information that you are allowing to stay in your inbox, and then you are physically forwarding it to people that it's more relevant to in your organization. Stop doing that. Let's automate that. Let's make it so it happens automatically and it just disappears from your inbox if it's not something you need and somebody else needs. Can do all of that for you, but you can do it for yourself. You've got to do this stuff. I could go on for a long time about this. The inbox is really an area where you need to spend some time and focus on, so that you can become more effective. Work with everybody in your organization, so culturally you don't have an organization that is wasting time. They're less effective because they're so busy spending time on email. And you might think, oh, it's only a couple of seconds here or there, or hit and reply or whatever. It's not that. It becomes a culture, it becomes a habit, it becomes what people spend their time doing. And even a few seconds here and there adds up. And really what it is a distraction. You're not a good multitasker. So when you get distracted by a notification in your inbox, then it's like it takes a few seconds and a few minutes sometimes to regain your concentration. Now, what was I working on? You interrupt the flow. So you want to deal with that. As I say, I can keep going on, and I will if I don't shut up now. So I'm gonna shut up now. That's about where I want to leave it today. But I'm really curious from you whether you agree with this. Do you fancy yourself a great manager who's very effective, an excellent leader, and you pride yourself on staying on top of your inbox, or being very quick to reply, as I once used to think was a good sign of a good leader? I want to hear some pushback, or I would like to hear from you in the comments if you have some other best practices that you've implemented, or if you completely agree with me, you're like, yes, and here's how I dealt with it in my organization. Leave a comment that we can all learn from. We need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.